Next, we are now moving to New South Wales. Joining us is Dr. Mudie Cunningham, who is the director of Wollongong Art Gallery, who, like Laurie, is an artist, a lecturer, and general arts organiser. Daniel's work and roles have intertwined with Laurie's, most recently at Cementa in regional New South Wales, but stretching back to Western Sydney University, which is where he, in the 1990s, first met Lawrence.
Continental drift is the slow movement of Earth's land masses, once fused together, now inching apart over millennia, shaping the world as we know it. It is a quiet force that rearranges geography, carves new coastlines, and redefines connection. Lawrence Tan's life followed a similar path, expansive, shifting, and deeply transformative. Born in The Hague, rooted in Chinese heritage, and working between Wollongong, Beijing, Las Vegas, and beyond, Lawrence moved through the world with the inevitability of tectonic plates, bridging cultures, reconfiguring boundaries, and creating new ways of seeing wherever he went. His practice was one of constant translation between East and West, tradition and technology, humour and critique. Lawrence was always in motion, always reshaping the landscape around him. Continental drift personified. Though his life was shaped by movement, translation, and reinvention, at the heart of it all was Wollongong. This city was more than a backdrop of his peripatetic life. Little old Wollongong was Lawrence's cultural home and a site of lasting impact. Lawrence first arrived in Wollongong in the 1980s, teaching the Faculty of Creative Arts at the University of Wollongong, where he also completed his Master of Creative Arts. His academic and conceptual grounding took root in Wollongong, and his teaching inspired a generation of local artists and thinkers. In 1992, Lawrence became the inaugural artist in residence at Wollongong Art Gallery after it had moved to its current location in the former council chambers. This was a pivotal role that led directly to the creation of Adapt in Force, one of his most iconic public works. Adorning the gallery's facade, and which later, I think just this one here, and which later was touring to Queensland Art Gallery and Casula Powerhouse, and reimagined for Scotch by the Sea. But even though it toured, its origins were deeply tied to Wollongong, its steelworks, and its symbolic textures of labour control. Wollongong was not just a place that Lawrence lived and worked, it was a community he helped shape. He served on the board of Wollongong Art Gallery for several years, contributing his vision to the city's cultural leadership. He also exhibited regularly with Wollongong's long-running artist-run initiative, Project Contemporary Art Space. Memorable exhibitions including Just a Memento in 95 and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner in 99, reflected his interest in social ritual and cultural inheritance. Even a suburban Chinese restaurant like Lim's Cafe became, in Lauren's eyes, a symbol of forged authenticity, a survival strategy turned cultural artefact. Through his research, Lawrence believed Lim's to be the first Chinese restaurant in Wollongong, with Ma's Cafe in the north of Wollongong following soon after. And if you know, Ma's stands for meals are really satisfying. He salvaged signage from both when they were abandoned and used them in his evocative work, Cafe Curtains, a series of light boxes incorporating restaurant signage paired with actual curtains from suburban Asian eateries. While signage changes, Lawrence noted the curtains often remain, made from the same indestructible materials, quietly carrying the textures of place and continuity. In works like these, everyday sites became visual archives, personal, cultural, and collective, telling broader stories of migration, resistance, hospitality, and transformation. One of Lawrence's most sharply satirical local works, local to Wollongong, Game Theory 1 from 2000, was made for a Biennale of Sydney satellite exhibition at Wollongong Art Gallery. Based on his research into theories of risk, the installation proposed a provocative idea. What if urban development approvals were decided not by bureaucratic processes, but by a game of roulette. This was Wollongong before the administration. The interactive work was operated from the original mayoral chair of the city's 1950s council chambers, faithfully reconstructed using matching timbers and historical detailing. Lauren's embedded imagery of the Illawarra and local heraldry to create a convincing veneer of institutional legitimacy. In doing so, he exposed the arbitrary logic of civic decision-making, turning risk into ritual and ritual into critique to create a truly subversive work. Placing a work like this in a civic cultural site, a regional gallery once home to the council chambers, was itself part of the commentary. It pointed to the precarity of cultural institutions, often starved of adequate support and subject to the whims of government funding cycles. We all know how decisions about arts funding can feel just as arbitrary and just as powerful in shaping or destabilising the future of an institution. Game Theory 1 was conceptually rich, locally anchored and structurally playful. It used familiar objects to question how power operates in public space. Lauren's work didn't just observe systems, it infiltrated them. Among the most powerful works of his to connect ideas of death, design, industry and spectacle is the installation Vegas of Death, now held in the collection of Wollongong Art Gallery. The work bridges two poles of his practice, Wollongong and Las Vegas, the local and the hyperreal. Set in a coffin-shaped arcade cabinet, the piece mimics a Vegas poker machine but uses crematorium imagery, ash hoppers, mortuary signage, disposable coffin fittings to draw uncomfortable connections between gaming culture and the industrialised rituals of death. For Lawrence, modern cremation symboled a broader truth, that even in our final moments, they are increasingly shaped by efficiency, logistics and mechanisation. He saw cities like Wollongong and Vegas not as opposites but as reflections, industries of transformation, whether of coal or culture, steel or souls. Vegas of Death is visually seductive, full of light and sound, but at its core, it delivers a powerful commentary on how human mortality finds common ground in obsolescence. It reveals how entertainment masks erasure and how even the deeply personal experiences of grief can be commodified by capitalism. Lauren's sharp observation of migration, displacement and power were not confined to sculpture or installation. His drawing Rue de Plaisir 1990 in the Wollongong Art Gallery collection feels strikingly prescient today. Created during a residency at the Cité in Paris, the work traces the Statue of Liberty's origins in France before its arrival in New York in 1886. The title, meaning Streets of Pleasure, is laced with irony. His charcoal rendering shows not celebration, but the gritty street life of impoverished immigrant hawkers in northern Paris. In the weeks after Lauren's death in the US, as Trump began his new presidential term and a French politician called for the repatriation of the Statue of Liberty, the work's layered commentary on the symbolism and politics of liberty felt especially acute. Like so much of Lauren's practice, it collapses history and the present, the ideal and the lived reality, reminding us that migration and displacement are deepening into an ever more urgent humanitarian crisis. Las Vegas, where Lawrence spent much of his final years and where he ultimately passed, was both his subject and his stage. Vegas, with its simulations, repetition and excess, allowed Lawrence to reflect back the contradictions of the contemporary age. Yet even in Las Vegas, his roots in Wollongong remained evident. The enduring concerns of labour, migration and adaptation in his practice continued to pulse beneath the neon. His art, wherever it landed, was shaped by the questions he first asked in the Gong. Lawrence Tan lived a life in translation between continents, cultures, forms and meanings. He taught us that art is not a set of answers, but a process of reimagining the world, a way to confront systems, question rituals and imagine new ways to be. As a personal postscript, I met Lawrence in 1998 at the design school at Western Sydney University, then UWS. I was teaching design theory and Lawrence a lecture in graphic design took me under his wing. I was living in Sydney's southern suburbs, commuting to Penrith in the west, which he immediately understood. He was living even further south in the Illawarra. Early in our friendship, he invited me to write a catalogue essay for a show he was in a gallery foray. It was one of my first published essays. At the time, the Star Casino in Sydney had just opened as Star City, and I was working up an ambitious proposal to exhibit one of Lauren's gaming consoles inside the casino itself. It made perfect sense to me, place the work back inside the system it was critiquing. The project was initially embraced by the casino's program team, but ultimately rejected by management, who asked, why should they install a machine that cost money rather than made it? A machine that could be looked at but not played. So that early show failure became the beginning of a lasting friendship. Ironically, the last time we planned to work together, another unrealised project, came in the final months of his life. I curated Lauren's into Samantha's 2024 festival. Fresh from a trip to Las Vegas, and despite his exhaustion, he travelled from Wollongong to Candos in regional New South Wales for a residency to develop his work for the festival. And this was in December 2023. Over that week, he met locals and devised a plan to collaborate with the town's bakery on a batch of Samantha mooncakes, a way of extending Sydney's Moon Festival into the regions through food and social exchange. Soon after that residency, he learned of his cancer diagnosis and withdrew from the festival to focus on recovery. Though his Candos mooncakes were unrealised, they are evidence of Lauren's deep generosity of spirit and speak to his enduring commitment to community and cultural exchange through work that lives on, not as monuments, but as shifting ground. In closing, Lawrence contributed to my funeral songs art project, selecting the 1980s Aussie rock banger Heaven on Stick by James Rain. Infinitely unpretentious and unexpected, the choice was quintessentially Lawrence, equal parts wit and philosophical punchline. It was a farewell in his own language, with a rhythm I can imagine drifting across the ocean view with the home that he shared in Mombara with Vivian. Love you, Vivian.